Prometheus is the most fascinating movie I have seen. A little peek inside my brain, I'm more drawn to discussions about movies that are rough around the edges than masterpieces. I kind of feel like there's more to see and more to talk about, and Prometheus is definitely rough around the edges. There are a lot of other films with hundreds of more issues than this one. It's marvelous in ways that are obvious to anyone, but then again, it flounders in basic, fundamental ways. I don't know if it's the worst good movie ever or the best bad one. Whichever list it's on, it's surely at the top of it. First, what it does really well. Right off the bat, Prometheus looks better than most other things put to film, even since then. Ridley Scott is a visionary director in more than one sense, and this film feels so real it's almost tactile. The vastness of space, the desolation of LV-223, the haunted feel of the tomb that is the engineer's ship, nothing feels like a soundstage here, and it's all complemented by its impressive score. In the age of forgettable synthetic scores that provide texture, a sweeping and melodic orchestral soundtrack with a main theme you can actually hum is refreshing. And don't forget the film's pretty much impeccable casting, with one glaring exception. You can tell Ridley Scott still has a great handle on what he does. Plus, the film has a lot more on its mind than most other movies these days, especially mainstream big-budget blockbusters. Why then is Prometheus, as I love to say, it's those pesky problems on the page, which isn't unique to this movie, obviously. What makes me obsessed with this one, though, is how it feels like it commits those problems on purpose. I don't know if it's writer Damon Lindelof's influence, or if he was just following Ridley Scott's train of thought. I'm more inclined to believe the former. Unnecessary mystery boxes and broad archetypical characters are more his wheelhouse. Sometimes his style works, like with Watchmen and most of Lost. But when it comes up short, we get Prometheus and the end of Lost. And it's frustrating because there used to be a more cohesive story in there that was ripped out in favor of hamstrung mystery box type stuff. The film asks a ton of questions. In fact, those questions are the motivating force behind most of those characters, and you as the audience expect some answers, but the film goes out of its way to not provide anything. But the thing is, it used to. One mystery revolves around the engineers, humanity's creators, who seem to leave clues that invite humans to their homeworld, LV-223. The last act of the film implies that LV-223 is, in fact, a military installation and not the engineer homeworld. And the black goo in the film, which leads to all kinds of horrible monsters and mutations, is a bioweapon of some kind. And you're given this information because the captain of the ship kind of randomly walks in and says that. Earlier drafts insinuate 223 is home to something closer to a temple rather than a military base. The mural, which the crew sees upon first entering the installation, depicts something resembling a xenomorph, the Deacon, which the engineers worshipped like a god. Now, to understand the Deacon, we need to rewind a little bit. The engineers are super advanced, but somehow lost the ability to reproduce. Their lifespans measure something like 300,000 years, so I guess it wasn't an immediate crisis. They then happened upon an alien life form one day that resembled what we know of as a facehugger. This life form had the ability to impregnate other beings and create life, which the engineers were all about. One of them, a chosen one, elected to be impregnated and was then sacrificed to bring forth the Deacon, which is what we see on the mural. The engineers used the blood of this Deacon to further seed other planets, or at least try to. This is possibly what we see in the first scene of the movie, an engineer using the blood of the Deacon to seed Earth with life. Or maybe not, because they eventually ran out of the Deacon's blood and were forced to try and synthesize their own version of it, which is the black goo seen in the film. And it was not nearly as effective, and that first scene could have been depicting a failed attempt to seed a planet other than Earth with the black goo. The goo is very flawed, which implies that the power of true creation cannot be emulated, and that the engineers, humanity's gods, are themselves mortal. The black goo does not create life in its maker's image, it creates monsters. Another mystery of the film is why the engineers eventually try to destroy their own creation, humans. It's nowhere near answered in the film. Instead, the question is dangled in front of the audience as bait for a sequel. A sequel, mind you, which largely abandons that premise after the mixed reception to Prometheus. The crew of the Prometheus actually gets their answers from the awakened engineer in an earlier script, which was totally cut. In that script, the engineer explains Earth was the only planet to be successfully seeded by the blood of the deacon, and the engineer refers to Earth as Eden. The name of the engineer homeworld can be translated paradise, and they made Earth just like it. But humans proved unworthy of their home, doing what humans do best, killing each other, starting wars, all that as the engineers watched them. They then took a single child from Earth to paradise in order to enlighten him. They then planted him back among his people so he could educate them. But as the engineer says, the child was punished when he tried to do so. And that's an obvious reference to Jesus, supporting the theme of God and creation in the movie. When this child was punished, the engineers gave up on humans. Now, Peter Wayland then brushes past all of that and still asks for the key to unending life, or at least extended life. The engineer, translated through David, asks why he should do that since humans are unworthy. Wayland responds that he created David the android and is therefore equal to engineers, to gods, by virtue of creating life himself. And that's when the engineer seems to regard David with admiration before ripping off his head and killing Wayland. Wayland represents humanity's hubris and everything engineers hate about their creation. It's a very important scene, and it solidifies and drives home the central theme of the movie. It's really what the movie is working towards, but as it is, it's not even in the movie. It leaves a gaping hole. Another big question: why exactly does David go off the rails? Well, it's explained in an interview with Ridley Scott and Michael Fassbender. Minutes after he's born, David realizes that he's superior to Peter Wayland, his maker, and yet he has to serve him. This creates a contradiction in David's mind that he can't shake. Wayland is a false god. Now, David couldn't rebel against Wayland because of his programming, but he could still secretly wish for Wayland's death for years and act in other ways. This could explain why, in that earlier script draft, David does not translate the awakened engineer's anger at Wayland's intrusion. It's not a direct action against his human master, just an omission of translation, one that happens to all but guarantee hostilities. Plus, his time in isolation during the journey to LV-223 also led to David's greater sense of independence, as Scott and Fassbender said. Years without maintenance led to a greater chance of going rogue. Now, none of these answers can be found in the actual movie, the actual text. They were either torn out or never made it out of the heads of the filmmakers at all. They didn't think it was important enough, because apparently synthesizing a mystery to try and draw in their audience and get them to ask questions was worth more. But the thing is, when you ask a question, you want an answer eventually, or at least enough pieces to put it together. We like puzzles to solve, but we need the pieces to do it. And that's what's bothersome when it comes to storytellers in the vein of Damon Lindelof or J.J. Abrams. They take the puzzle, throw away the middle pieces, and pat themselves on the back for it. At least Prometheus has the answers somewhere in someone's head, unlike other movies that never bothered. Getting back on track, Prometheus had a satisfying story in there somewhere that was taken out piecemeal. It also used to be a more satisfying prequel. The movie Alien took us to LV-426, where the crew of the Nostromo first picked up the title character. Prometheus takes us to LV-223, a moon orbiting the same planet as 426. That's a happy coincidence: the crashed ship, the engineer with the burst chest, possibly the eggs, but turns out it's all unrelated. And this wasn't originally the case, because early on it was meant to be LV-426, but it was changed to another moon orbiting the same planet, so close, but so glaring. And they might have done this because the team couldn't resist teasing a sequel. Actually, I think that is the reason. Lindelof said at least once that they changed the location of the film because they liked the option of going to LV-426 in a future film. And that's a problem, because diluting the movie you have now just to entice someone to see what you make later is a bad habit. They took out the answers from this movie so that you'd come back for the sequel. They took out concrete connections to Alien so they could do them later. But the thing is, Hollywood is the least concrete place in the world. Nothing is guaranteed there, and they ended up backpedaling anyway for the sequel, leading to two movies that were weaker for it in the end. So, Two of Prometheus's big problems are saving the good stuff for later and being too coy. But the problem also comes down to the characters. Good characters can save a dicey story, but in this case, the film has a deep cast that inhabits paper-thin characters that don't make sense. You've got a geologist who thinks he's a rock star, too cool to be friendly, and too cynical to appreciate the gravity of possibly discovering proof of advanced alien life. And when he does come face to face with it, he's like pissed off? Like, dude, we told you this could happen. Then you've got the guy who can't help but literally stick his face right into a clearly aggressive unknown creature. I mean, look at that. And then there's the scientist who literally says don't be a skeptic to a colleague, telling him not to take off his helmet, as if science isn't supposed to be all about skepticism, you know, not believing something unless there's adequate evidence. Also, the dude takes off his helmet just because there's breathable air around them after 2 seconds of finding out, as if that's the only factor here, not like there could be parasites or pathogens around them that their bodies have no immunity for. The man is an idiot, and he's not supposed to be in the context of the story. Nobody points it out, it's not a point of growth. He's brash because it serves as a convenient shortcut to the next plot point. In fact, very few of the central characters are likable or capable, and it makes you wonder how they got their advanced degrees, or for that matter, were chosen for this mission. And so the characters don't make much sense, which really hurts immersion. You can have the deepest, most pondering script as this movie does, even still, but if the characters don't ring true, it's all for nothing. In that case, maybe even if all that stuff that was taken out of the script was put back in, it could not even matter. Prometheus is a fascinating case study of a movie so close to greatness yet so far. It surgically cuts out substance for style, or if you prefer, it tosses out the meat for the condiments. It has the odd mindset that plot, world building, and theme belongs everywhere else other than the film. Character motivation is doled out in interviews. Lore is gestured to in the most vague way, but locked away in the filmmakers' heads. And theme is thrown on YouTube. That's right, I didn't even mention how Peter Whalen's TED Talk on the myth of Prometheus was relegated to YouTube. It could have been a scene that crystallized not only a theme of the movie, but also Peter Whalen's own driving force. But no, YouTube. It's all done to try and make the film more tantalizing, but it just makes a convoluted mess. It's an ambitious mistake. With all that said, if you haven't seen the movie in a while, I'd give it a go. I still watch it more often than almost any other movie somehow. Now my questions for you are, what's a black sheep film you watch all the time? And what are other movies that are so close yet so far from greatness? I'd love to hear your thoughts. As usual, grab a like on your way out, sub if you haven't already, I'd love to have you. If you're new, take a look at my other stuff. My next video hopefully is on Halo the show. This video was supposed to be that, but it's not quite ready yet, so I put this out instead. Stay tuned for that one. For now, stay tough and stop by again sometime.